Greetings with lovers everywhere, and welcome to E-Train Talks. I'm your host, E-Train. I'm a 13-year-old literacy advocate, podcast host, and booktuber, and the founder of a 501c3 nonprofit called E-Train Talks, Inc. So, it is always incredibly important to me to shine a light on diverse stories, especially LGBTQ plus stories. And today's interview is no different, as the author I'm talking with has won the Lambda Literary Award for LGBTQ plus novels, and his stories kicked off a renaissance of LGBTQIA plus stories in the young adult book world. His novels have paved the way for emerging LGBTQ plus writers, and his stories from Wide Awake to Boy Meets Boy have created an amazing world of LGBTQ plus books. This is my interview with the amazing award-winning novelist and bringer of hope and book joy to all the writing world, David Levithan. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that you took time out of your day to talk. And for those who don't know, his stories, as I mentioned earlier, they revolutionized the way LGBTQ plus characters and storylines are portrayed in stories. And you go past, common tropes, and you create beautiful stories that truly bring out heart, bring light to the world, and I had the opportunity to be sent your newest book, Wide Awake Now, and I truly loved it so much. I love the topics. It's so relevant for today's world. And now this interview is mainly focused on Wide Awake Now, but there are going to be questions about some of your other books and questions about you as a writer and a person. So the first question I have for you is about your newest novel, Wide Awake Now. So Abraham Stein had made history by being the first gay and Jewish president of the United States, which is awesome. I love that storyline. And Stein may not be a real person, but it does beg the question that as the creator of the character and this story as a whole, how close do you think we are to selecting either a gay president or a Jewish one, or, both?
I mean, I think it is more plausible now than it has ever been before, in that at this point we've had very, very significant candidates, whether it's Pete Buttigieg, who is gay, Bernie Sanders, who's Jewish, who have come close to getting their party's nomination. We just saw a Jewish woman elected president of Mexico, which was not on anybody's bingo card for something that would happen. So I don't think it is out of the realm of possibility. I think it is very possible. And so I definitely want to lean in that when writing Wide Awake Now.
Absolutely. Your story, it is incredibly relevant, and I really hope that one day we'll see more representation. We're already starting to see some more light go into the world when it comes to representation in government. Even in the United States government, there are positions that have been won by people who are LGBTQ+, which I love to see. And my next question for you is, Wide Awake Now, while it's called a reimagining of your story Wide Awake, which is the original story in the series, if you could call it a series, and it still relates quite closely. Well, your first book, Wide Awake, relates quite closely to our current presidential campaign climate. So when writing your beautiful story, whether it came to Wide Awake Now or Wide Awake, did you find yourself purposefully trying to connect your novels to the times of today? Or I guess with Wide Awake, the times of yesterday, but it was today? It's yeah, I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's where like, yeah, I will give an answer, and it's just sort of almost, it's going to be like, wait, present, past, future, they all come together.
Yeah.
Because what happened was, I wrote my book Wide Awake. I basically did the writing for it in 2004, 2005, and it was after George W. Bush was reelected. I was like, there were a lot of bands that I loved who were doing protest novels like Green Day or Bright Eyes, and I was like,
Right.
well, what's a protest novel look like? A protest song, okay, but what's a protest novel? And so I wrote Wide Awake about the election of the first gay Jewish president, and I was very much thinking about the 2000 election with Gore and Bush, but I wanted to set it in the future, so I set it basically 20 years in the future for a presidential election. So basically, I wrote a novel set in 2024. But I was writing it in 2004. And so there were parts of the novel that I really liked. Sorry about that. I'm just going to hang up on them. So there were parts of the novel that I really liked, but I did get it wrong when it came to imagining what 2024 was going to be like, because you know what? The pandemic, I didn't really see that coming in 2004. Donald Trump as president, did not see that coming in 2004. So there were all of these things that really weren't in the book and made it sort of inaccurate. So I thought, what if I take this book that I wrote about my imagined 2024 and instead now writing it again in 2023, set it in the real or as close to the real 2024 as I can imagine
Mhm.
9 months ago. So that's what it was about, was basically taking something that I wrote pretty much as speculative fiction and then turning it into actually an alternate reality of our current year.
Right. And I just love that storyline. And I think, as you said, no one's psychic. I mean, there could be psychics in the world, but we don't really know if they are. Though they are claiming that they are, and we just don't believe them. But
Right.
anyway, yeah, I just think it's incredibly hard to predict the political climate of today, especially in a time like 2004. There's so much that we didn't see coming, and I still think that you did an incredible job, and I love the fact that you revisited Wide Awake in the current climate. And my next question for you is, as it is Pride Month, and many of your stories, pretty much all of them actually, feature LGBTQ plus representation, which I truly admire and appreciate. Would you mind sharing why you believe it's so important to keep shining a light on LGBTQ voices in stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, when I started with Boy Meets Boy in 2003, so 21 years ago, I mean, we just weren't on the shelves. I mean,
Right.
our voices, there were a few amazing authors who were trying to get our voices on the shelves, but there weren't a lot of us,
Mhm.
and nobody was really paying attention. And so a bunch of other authors and I in 2003 published books that really changed things and said, no, our voices deserve to be on the YA shelves in particular, and we need to share our stories because we have all sorts of narratives that we can't just have one plot for all gay stories. We need lots of different gay stories. We need lots of intersection of gay stories and other parts of our identities. And that really resonated, and the readers were there. And so I think especially right now when so many people are trying to erase our identities and erase our literature and ban our books and ban discussion of who we are in schools, that just means we have to be even louder and we have to have more books out there. Because let me tell you, like in 2003, if they had wanted to erase us, all they had to do was erase about 25, 30 books.
Mm.
But right now, if they want to erase us, there are literally thousands of books that they would have to erase in order to take us off the shelves. And that's just not going to happen.
Absolutely. And your stories and the stories of so many other LGBTQ authors and stories that feature characters with the same representation, there's just so many, and it brings me so much hope. But as you said, there is a lot of book banning, a lot of silencing of voices. Even if book banners and book challengers can't go after every single story, there are still books being banned. And I'm curious, for you, have your books personally been banned?
Oh yeah, I mean they have, even from the very beginning. There have been challenges to the books, but I have to say that the nature of the challenge has changed. That right now it is so political. It's not coming from a genuine place. It's a very cynical, trying to divide and conquer, and trying to silence us, not because of a genuine fear, but more because a politician is saying to do it. And
Right.
that, in a way, is more insidious, but that's why we're pushing back. I mean, and most people in America don't like book bans. They don't think people's freedom to read should be taken away. And so I think what we're seeing now, which is great, is that the more books are challenged, the more people come out to defend them. And I think that is so important right now because, again, right now in certain parts of the political spectrum, it is the banning books is the cool thing to do, and we are pushing back and being like, no, that's actually not cool at all, and it's actually the opposite of freedom. So we need to keep these books on the shelves.
And it's just so sad, and it's just heartbreaking that people kind of try and be so twisted about it. They don't just, ban books for maybe their religious beliefs, but they just, as you said, they do it because a politician says it, but they also just twist it, and they say they're doing it. They say they love freedom of speech, yet they're silencing
Right.
voices, and they're pretty much doing the opposite of it. They just twist the words to make it sound like what they do is right, and then when we try to fight back, they say that it's wrong. And it's just so heartbreaking. But I love that people like you are fighting against that, and it really warms my heart to see.
Well, and I love that people like you are fighting against that. That I think what's amazing now is it is. I mean, I continually throw down this challenge to everyone because it is always viewed as like, oh well, we have to determine what the teenagers read, and which is ridiculous. And what I love is that, to my knowledge, there's never been a book challenge that has been caused by a teenager. No teenager has ever made protested a book in their school library and said, no, this shouldn't be on the shelves. Like teenagers understand, like, you should have the freedom to read whatever you want. If you don't want it, then don't pick it up off the shelf. Like that's, but it should be there. And what's amazing is that, again, right now, your generation gets it completely. But so the older the generations get, it's about control, and it's about, so this conservative majority trying to impose themselves onto the generations that follow, and it's just not working.
Right. And yeah, it's heartbreaking, but people like you, as I said, you're doing amazing things. And now moving along from talking about your stories, I have a question about your personal work. So I read online that you worked your way through Scholastic, where you've been an editorial director, and all the while you were pursuing your own writing, and you're still in that writing world in many different ways. So how do you think your editing experience at Scholastic, as well as your time working with other writers and collaborating with them, how do you think that shaped your own writing journey and helped you as an author?
I mean, it's, they're so intertwined. I mean, I'm speaking to you from my Scholastic office right now, my very messy Scholastic office. But no, I needed to be an editor for 10 years before I sort of started writing, just so I could understand how to sort of work with other people's words before I really worked on my own. But I learned so much from all of the authors that I work with. My second book, The Realm of Possibility, is in verse, and I never in a million years would have written anything in verse if I hadn't worked on two poetry memoirs, Billy Merrill's Talking in the Dark and Aaron Corrigan's You Remind Me of You. And working with them on their poetry made me be like, oh, I sort of understand this more. Maybe I'll try it. And
Right.
that's where that book came from. So so I'm always learning. But the truth of it is, so much of what I edit has nothing to do with what I write. Like right now, the biggest part of my life as an editor is I work on the Hunger Games, and we just announced there's a new book. But but certainly, while you were reading Wide Awake now, you weren't thinking, oh yeah, this is just like the Hunger Games. Like it like these could not be more different. But that's what I love about being an editor. It's almost like being an actor, that I can sort of try on different roles that I would never be me. Like I will never write the Hunger Games. I will never write the Babysitters Club or any of the other things I work on. But as an editor, I get to sort of witness the authors as they do their thing, and I learn lessons from that I can apply to my own books.
Absolutely. And you're right. I did not get very many Hunger Games vibes from my work.
Right.
So maybe next time.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. So while researching for our talk, I discovered that at least four of your stories have actually been adapted into films, whether
Mhm.
they were in theaters or just on streaming sites. So I just think that's super incredible and a dream come true for so many writers. One of your book adaptations was from your story Every Day, and I watched the movie with my family and
Mhm.
I loved it. It was so much
Oh.
fun to watch, and I know just I love seeing the differences between movie adaptations and these stories.
Mhm.
But I guess my question for you is, how much say did you have in the process of adapting your stories into a movie sort of setting? And was it an enjoyable experience watching everything go by and so just turn into an incredible film?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was basically like cheerleader slash consultant for the movies. That I did not write the scripts, um, and I honestly didn't even want to read the scripts, because I feel that if you were going to have a successful adaptation, the person who's doing the adaptation has to make it their own. It's you
Right.
don't want the author over your shoulder being like, no, don't cut that part. Um, and I genuinely love all four of the adaptations, which for any author to be able to say that is kind of incredible. Um, but I'm really lucky because when I write, I don't visualize things. So if you ask me what characters look like or what their rooms look like, I genuinely have no idea. I just sort of go with, it's about the words for me. But as a result, like the contrast, Rachel Cohn, who I've written many books with, and the first adaptation I had was Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, and
Right.
which I wrote with her. And she, like when she's writing, she is picturing everything, and she knows exactly what everybody's wearing, and like, and it's basically a movie in her head. And it was fascinating because when we went to the set and we saw them filming, it was really easy for me because I wasn't like, oh, it doesn't match the movie in my head. Whereas it was much harder for her because she was like, no, this is not how I pictured it. And she loved the movie too. So I don't want to make it sound like she didn't, but there was more of a learning curve for her. Whereas I'm just like this happy guy who's just like, oh, that's cool. Oh, is that what that character looks like? Neat. That's great.
I
So
love
that's been fun. And then I've also been extraordinarily lucky because all four adaptations I've gotten to go to set and hang out with everybody and to be there in the world of the book. And that's just crazy. The highlight for me was probably the most surreal moment, or one of the most surreal moments in my career, was when they were filming Dash and Lily. They did it here in New York, and they had two overnight shoots at the Strand bookstore, which is like my favorite bookstore ever, which is why Dash and Lily starts in the Strand, because I love it. So we were there, and at the time, Rachel and I were both writing book 3 in the series while they were filming book 1, and it was my turn to write a chapter. So literally, it was 3 in the morning. I had my laptop. I was working on a chapter, and then I looked up, and the characters are in the room with me. And really, that is not something a writer ever gets, to like basically physically be in the room with the characters. And I was like, this is so weird, and I love this so much. So that will be one of the most memorable experiences I've had.
I love that. And it just must be so much fun kind of seeing, while didn't you personally did not see the characters that much in your head, it still just must be like kind of seeing your, I guess, your children sort of flourishing and becoming real. That just must be such a surreal experience.
It is, and you learn new things about them by what the actors do. Like it's just you see these different sides of characters you thought you knew, but then again, the adapter or the actor will do something, and you're like, wow, oh, that's pretty cool. And it just adds to your experience of who the character is and your understanding of them.
So, when looking into your writing journey, I noticed you've collaborated with other authors on a number of your books, from Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist to so many more. I haven't spoken to many authors who've co-authored on as many stories as you. Probably I haven't talked to as many at all. Um, so how do you go about starting a book collaboration? Do you have to reach out to each other? Do you have that like kind of clicking moment in your head, like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this? Um, and what do you enjoy most about writing stories with other authors?
Yeah, no, I've now written books with I think 6 other people, which is highly unusual. And it started with Nick and Nora's Info Playlist. Rachel and I were friends. We weren't close friends at that point, but we knew each other. And she basically said, "I want to write a he said she said novel, but I don't think I could do the guy part. So I'd love to write it with a guy author." And I was like, "Well, I qualify for that." Um, and so we didn't even talk about how we were going to do it. She basically was like, I want it to be about two teens named Nick and Nora who are from New Jersey and are in New York City for one night. Go write the first chapter, David. I was like, what? Oh, okay. And then like I got an idea. I wrote a chapter, like basically sat down, I think in one sitting or maybe two, emailed it to her, and then like the next day got a second chapter from her reacting to mine. And again, we hadn't even talked about the fact that we wouldn't plot it out ahead of time, but that ended up being the template for pretty much all of my collaborations. That basically we have a premise,
Mhm.
and then we just send chapters back and forth to each other, basically to discover what the story is. And it's really fun because on the one hand, you are one of the writers, you are in control, but you're not in control of everything. And so it's almost like being a writer and a reader at the same time, that like I can think I know where it's going, but until I get the other person's chapter, I have no idea where it's going. And usually the way that we work is we're always shifting it up. And that hopefully is fun reading experience for the reader, because if they're like, well, I didn't see that twist coming, I can be like, I didn't see that twist coming either. And that's kind of fun.
That sounds super fun. And your very first book series, Likely Story, which you also co-wrote, you wrote under the pen name David Van Etten. So
Mhm.
I say that's not just a rather unique name, but I just think it's really interesting that you wrote under a pseudonym. So how did you come up with the name firstly? I know your first name is David, but the other parts. And why did you choose to write under a pseudonym?
Well, I applaud you for the deep dive because that is probably the most obscure project that I've ever worked on. Um, but no, it's actually it's a fun story. So basically, Likely Story is about a girl whose mother is a soap opera diva who basically ends up becoming the showrunner of the soap opera that her mother is on, and the tension. And it came about because, and now you'll see where the answer to your question is coming. Um, I was friends with somebody named Chris Van Etten,
Mhm.
whose writing partner was named David Ozanich. And they had always they'd had this story that they wanted to pitch as a TV show about this girl. But one day, Chris and I were at a birthday party together, and I was talking about how I wrote YA novels, and he was like, "Oh, we have this sort of YA idea." And basically, I was like, "Oh, we should try to write that together." So the three of us actually wrote it together, and it was very convenient because two of us were named David, so we were like, well, that's the first name of the pen name, and then we used Chris's last name, Van Etten, as the last name. So that's how it came to be. But basically, that one we did plot out the books together, and then I wrote the first one. I think David wrote the second one, and Chris wrote the third one, with us all sort of giving
Um,
comments.
One book that I specifically read that I truly loved, I didn't just read Wide Awake Now, as you can see, I have
Hmm.
Boy Meets Boy here, and it's actually the 10th anniversary edition. So, Boy Meets Boy is a story that I read and loved. And I think what's really important about your story is that it was written before gay marriage was legal in pretty much every state, which is why well, a lot of your stories were actually. So it's just why Boy Meets Boy is considered revolutionary and groundbreaking. It was your first book, and it truly broke so many barriers in the YA space. And your debut did that. Just think that's super awesome. And he featured a transgender star quarterback, lesbian and gay characters, and many more LGBTQ plus characters, which is amazing to me. I love the representation in your story. And I guess my question for you is, were you at all nervous about the story being banned, receiving backlash, or just sharing it in the first place?
No, I mean, I wasn't. I mean, and I think this is where sort of, because I had been an editor for like 10 years, like I knew the publishing world, so I felt confident that it was ready for this,
Mhm.
um, and basically made a decision to call the book Boy Meets Boy, and I was like, I want this to be an out book. Like I want, like, because there was another book at the time called Geography Club by Brett Hartinger, which is also great, but his book is about kids who hide a GSA as a geography club, and it's really fun. And basically, the joke was that the book also was sort of hiding in plain sight. That there were libraries that would buy it, being like, "Oh, it's about geography, I'll get it." And somehow that's how the gay book got in. That the library that would never have bought a book called Boy Meets Boy would buy Geography Club, and I think that's valuable. But for me, I was like, it means so much to just see that you're on the shelf, and I want any kid in a Barnes and Noble or in a library who sees Boy Meets Boy, they'll know immediately, like, oh wow, there's a gay book in this section. That book must be really gay. And I worked to make it really gay to live up to its title. So yeah, so I wasn't scared. I thought it was time. But I will say that it was the first queer book that my publisher had ever done, for children or for teens, and there were still a lot of people who were hesitant about it, and about what the reaction would be. And certainly, I had protesters at one library event I did, like literally people picketing outside, which pretty much never happens for kids' books. Um, and definitely, and had other interactions of people being like, "Oh, it's great that you wrote that. I could never have that in my town." And I'd have to have the conversation. Well, why not? And they'd be like, well, I don't think we have any gay people in our town. And I'd be like, you think that, and yet you're wrong. So again, it was a learning curve for a lot of people, but having the book be so out, and again, so obviously what it was, that helped having the conversations that got people through the learning curve, which was great.
My next question for you is a question I love asking people that I interview. So if you could choose one song that best represents Wide Awake Now, what song would it be and why?
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's so It's so hard because so many songs actually inform the writing of the first book. So I'm going to go with one that again I think it's in the acknowledgments. Like there's a Bright Eyes song called "Road to Joy," which is like a play on words of "Ode to Joy," and it basically like he comes out and he's just like, let's make some noise. Like as
Yeah.
a sort of an activist, like, all right, the world is crazy. We need to make some noise. And like that, the book in itself is my attempt to make some noise. So yeah, I'm going to go with Road to Joy.
Now, I'm sad this is the final question of the interview, but I'm also excited to hear your answer. So,
Okay.
this is a question that I ask every single author that I've ever interviewed. If you could be or meet any literary character, and it could be your favorite author or your favorite book character, they could be fictional, they could be real, who would it be and why?
Oh my goodness. I'm going to go with first thought, best thought, which is sort of almost meta in that like my favorite book is Craig Thompson's Blankets. It's a graphic novel, which I love. And it's a graphic novel, but it's based on his life. And so one of the coolest things that has happened to me somewhat recently was it ended up that I got to hang out with Craig and like and fanboy all over him, but he was very sweet about it. But it was very strange because it was like meeting. He's an adult now. The book is about his teen years, but at the same time, I like had to keep reminding myself like you're meeting Craig, the person who created the book. You're not meeting the character who is fictional. But I loved it, and anytime he like made a reference to something in his life, I was like, oh wait, oh from the book. Okay, I got it. So I have in a way I have met one of my favorite characters, which again is very strange but true.
Yeah, that's what's really interesting about graphic memoirs. It's like you're really just meeting somebody that walked out of a story and into real life. And yeah, I
Yeah, and
think
then
that's
when
also
I edit them, like I edit Jared Kojaska, who wrote a book called Hey Kiddo, which is a graphic memoir, and it's always very funny writing editorial comments when they're the main character. It's like I don't know if Jared should do. Should I say I don't know if Jared should do this? Should I say I don't know if you should do this? Do I refer to you, but you're not you, but it is you? It's very confusing. Usually, I refer to them in the third person, even if I am. It is them.
yeah, I think that's definitely a complicated thing you're gonna have to tackle, but, um, yeah, I think it's still just so important seeing these graphic memoirs come out and seeing, of
Yeah.
course, as we reach the end of this interview, which is incredibly sad, but I do thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with me. I'm so grateful for all the stories that you write, for all the activism that you create through your books. Doesn't matter what obstacles come your way, you keep on writing and keep on sharing these powerful messages in your stories, and yeah, just thank you so much.
No, no, and again, thank you for spreading the word and for all the work that you're doing too, because we're all in this together. And again, it obviously any way we can get the books out is really helpful.
Absolutely. And you don't let the naysayers get to you. You shine on with your immensely incredible writing skills. And thank you for making the world a kinder, more inclusive space, a more accepting space. And I wish we could talk more, but it's time to say so long for now. Until
All
next
right.
time, everybody, stay safe, keep reading. And by keep reading, I mean keep reading David's incredible stories. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.